The governor is joining us to talk more about the pandemic's impact on Texas. Governor Abbott, thank you for being with us. You know, you told our
my pleasure.
Oh yeah, thank you. You told our partner station in Tyler that not wearing a mask will force you to close the state back down again. You know, what is the specific threshold that will prompt you to enact, additional layers of shutdown?
So it's all the data, and what the data is showing right now, in addition to what you talked about in Dallas, is that we've gone over the 10,000 mark of people who are hospitalized in the state of Texas right now. ICU units are getting increasingly filled, and we've averaged 99 deaths over the past 3 days. And so these are all very dangerous signs, and I got to tell you this, I expect the worst numbers to be coming in the coming weeks, because it was just in the middle part of June that we saw the expansion of people testing positive. So my point is this: we've taken measures now, such as closing bars, such as requiring masks, such as other enforcement mechanisms that should lead to positive results. If we don't see those positive results, if instead we see the further explosion in the number of people testing positive, especially the hospitalizations and the deaths, additional action will be required. But lastly, understand this, and that is medical doctors here in Texas at UT Southwestern have been very clear that wearing a mask is a way that we can continue to engage with people going to work, doing daily activities without having to lock the state down. If people will adopt that practice, there's no need to lock down the state once again.
You know, the Democratic mayor of Houston basically canceled the Texas Republican Party convention. The Texas GOP went to court to fight it, but today a judge denied their request, and now they're planning to take the fight to the state Supreme Court. You are the most powerful Republican in Texas and the one making decisions on public health. Do you agree with the judge's ruling?
Candidly, I haven't seen the judge's ruling. You're telling me information for the first time that I'm hearing about. But all I do know is what the party is doing. The party is working on trying to find ways for it to be able to conduct business, understanding that this is more than just a get-together. There's formal official business that has to be taken care of, and there are complex ways and strategies they need to go through to make sure that that business can be conducted.
Well, if ultimately we're not ready to see an in-person convention, are we ready to send kids back to the classrooms? Should that decision be delayed, specifically in areas like ours where we're seeing this boom in cases?
So this is so important to your viewers, and that is the TEA Commissioner Mike Morath has worked with the superintendent of DISD as well as other superintendents in your viewing area to make sure that we have strategies in place so that we can educate our children, whether they be in classrooms or they be at home. And so there are these distance learning strategies that have been improved upon since the conclusion of the last school year to ensure that if the pandemic is still spreading rapidly such that it would be unsafe for people to gather in schools, it would ensure that students would still be able to get educated just through these distance learning strategies. Let me tell you another fact that a lot of people are unaware of. Two key facts. One is parents get to choose whether or not their student or child would go to a classroom or learn from home. Another fact, and that is for schools across the state, if anyone in that school tests positive, that school will close down for 5 days to clear out the school, to sanitize it, to make it clear and clean before students return. So there are protocols in place to make sure that the school environment is going to be a very safe environment for students, teachers, and parents.
And Governor, I want to squeeze one more. And the superintendent of Dallas ISD says he doesn't see how high school kids can play a high contact sport like football this fall. New Mexico just canceled contact sports. Should the UIL consider pushing football to spring?
So I know the UIL is looking at all different types of alternatives, and they may be waiting until we get a little bit closer to the beginning of the school year. I'm sure that you have noticed and perhaps reported that as these teams have returned to practice, there have been outbreaks of COVID among teammates. And obviously it would be challenging to put a season together if that is happening. Let us get a little bit closer to the season beginning, and I know the UIL will be basing rules upon what is in the best interest for the health and safety of the players, of the students, of the parents.
You wore a mask. You're telling Texans to wear a mask. Would it help get your message across if President Trump would wear one as well?
Listen, I think everybody needs to wear a mask because it does slow the spread of the coronavirus, and it allows us to continue to make sure we do not have to lock down our economy.
All right, Governor Greg Abbott, thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it.